In this presentation from the Delhi Law Academy, we shall have a short discussion on the topic of confessions from the Indian Evidence Act. Before we take up the main topic, we shall have a quick look at the wider term of admissions. This is necessary because confessions are nothing but a subset of admissions. The term admission is defined in section 17 in the following way. An admission is a statement, oral or documentary or in electronic form, which suggests any inference as to any fact in issue or relevant fact. Admissions are relevant by virtue of section 21, and since they are relevant, they may be proved by virtue of section 5. However, there is a limitation. Admissions may be proved only against the person who makes them and not in his favor. Admissions cannot be proved by the person who makes them. Admissions can be proved only against the person who makes them. Here is our first question. What is the impact of an admission? Here is the answer. An admission by a party is substantive evidence if it fulfills the requirements of section 21 of the Evidence Act. Admissions are usually telling against the maker unless reasonably explained. This answer is the authority of the Supreme Court of India in Biswanath Prasad versus Dwarka Prasad. And now, confessions. The first question is, what is a confession? The difficulty lies in the fact that the term confession has not been defined in the Evidence Act or in any other enactment. Of necessity, therefore, we have to fall back upon judicial interpretation of this term. For our discussion, we rely on a widely accepted definition given by Lord Atkin of the Privy Council in the year 1939 in the celebrated case of Pakkala Narayan Swamy versus King Emperor. This definition has two parts: what constitutes a confession and what does not constitute a confession. Here is the first part. What constitutes a confession? And the answer again lies in two parts. Firstly, a confession is a statement which admits the offense in terms. And the second part is that a confession is a statement which substantially admits all the facts which constitute the offense. What does not constitute a confession? As per Lord Atkin, an admission of even a gravely incriminating fact is not of itself a confession. This is the example given by Lord Atkin. An admission that the accused is the owner of and was in recent possession of the knife or revolver which caused a death with no explanation of any other man's possession is of itself not a confession. Let us see an example of what constitutes a confession. A is accused of causing grievous hurt to B. A makes a statement. I struck B with a knife and hurt him. This statement amounts to an admission by A of an offense. This is an admission. But whether it is confession? This statement amounts to a confession if A does not add words to this statement to bring his case within any recognized exception. But if he adds words, then it remains an admission. It does not become a confession. So this statement, I struck B with a knife and hurt him. If that is the end of the statement, then it is a confession. But if words are added to it so as to bring this case within any recognized exception, then though it remains an admission, it does not become a confession. Let us see how words can be added. Let the statement be enlarged as under, I struck B with a knife and hurt him, but I acted in self-defense. If these words are added to the previous statement, then it is only an admission, it does not become a confession, because words have been added to this which bring this case within a recognized exception. What is the recognized exception? The exception of private defense. From the authority of the Supreme Court, we have another definition of confession. In CBI versus VC Shukla, the Supreme Court said that only voluntary and direct acknowledgement of guilt is a confession. Only voluntary and direct acknowledgement of guilt is a confession. The acknowledgement should be voluntary, the acknowledgement should be direct. No ifs and buts. We also have another definition of what does not constitute a confession from the Supreme Court, given by the court in Veera Ibrahim versus State of Maharashtra in 1976. This is what it is. A statement which contains an exculpatory assertion of some fact, which if true would negative the offence alleged, cannot amount to a confession. Confession is a species of admission. All confessions are admissions, but all admissions are not confessions. Confessions are a subset of admissions. The law relating to confessions is to be found generally in sections 24 to 30 of the Evidence Act. A confession is evidence against the maker of it, just as an admission is. An admission is an evidence against the maker of it by virtue of section 21. So also a confession, unless its admissibility is excluded by some provision of law. Certain confessions are not relevant. Though all admissions are relevant by virtue of section 21 of the Evidence Act, but certain confessions are not relevant. Which are those confessions? Confessions caused by certain types of inducements, threats or promises as specified in section 24. Confessions made to a police officer as specified in section 25, and confessions made while in custody of police as specified in section 26. However, section 27 provides an exception to the prohibition contained in the preceding sections and enables certain statements made by a person in police custody to be proved. We start our discussion on confessions with section 24. Here we will discuss those confessions which are caused by certain types of inducement, threats or promises. Only certain types of inducements, threats or promises, not all types. As per section 24, a confession made by an accused person is irrelevant in a criminal proceeding. And if it is irrelevant, it cannot be proved and therefore it will not be admissible. Section 24 says a confession made by an accused person is irrelevant in a criminal proceeding if the confession was caused by an inducement, threat or promise. But what type of inducement, threat or promise? Not every inducement, threat or promise is covered here. Only certain types. What are the characteristics of the inducement, threat or promise which will take away the confession out of the purview of section 21? The inducement, threat or promise must proceed from a person in authority, and it must be sufficient to make the accused person suppose that by making it he would gain an advantage or avoid an evil in reference to the proceedings against him. Section 24 excludes confessions caused by certain inducements, threats and promises. Excludes from what? Excludes from consideration under section 21. What are the essential ingredients of section 24? The answer is given by the Supreme Court in the following words. The statement in question must be a confession. Of course, section 24 applies only to a confession. So the statement in question must be a confession. This confession must have been made by an accused person. We shall shortly see what is meant by an accused person. That is, when does a person becomes accused. Third, it must have been made to a person in authority. Fourth, the confession must have been obtained by an inducement, threat or promise proceeding from a person in authority. Fifth, such inducement, threat or promise must have a reference to the charge against the accused person. And sixth, the inducement, threat or promise must be sufficient to cause the accused person to suppose that by making it, he would gain an advantage or avoid an evil in reference to the proceedings which are taken up against him. These ingredients have been given in this way by the Supreme Court in Veera Ibrahim versus State of Maharashtra, decided in 1976. When is a person said to be accused of an offence as used in section 24? We need to know the meaning of this term accused of an offence, because section 24 covers only those confessions which are given by a person who is accused of an offence. So the main requirements of section 24, as we just now saw, was that the person should be accused of an offence, there must be an inducement, threat or promise, and the inducement, threat or promise must be of a specific type. It must flow from an authority, and one more requirement. So we need to know what is meant by a person accused of an offence. The answer is given by the Supreme Court in R.C. Mehta versus State of West Bengal in 1970. And here is the answer. Normally, a person stands in the character of an accused when a first information report is lodged against him in respect of an offence before an officer competent to investigate it, or when a complaint is made relating to the commission of an offence before a magistrate competent to try or sent to another magistrate for trial of the offence. This is the stage at which a person becomes accused of an offence. Either there is an FIR or there is a complaint against him. Next, we come to confessions made to a police officer. This is the second category of confessions which are excluded from the purview of section 21. The concerned section is 25. No confession made to a police officer shall be proved against a person accused of an offence. The terms of section 25 are imperative. A confession made to a police officer under any circumstances is not admissible in evidence against the accused. There are no ifs and buts in section 25, no conditions. It is absolute. It says a confession made to a police officer under whatever circumstances is not admissible. It covers a confession made when the person was free and not in police custody, as also a confession made before any investigation had begun. So even when there was no investigation, even when the person was free and not in police custody, a confession given to a police officer under any of these circumstances is also not admissible. In this section, also the expression accused of any offence has been used. The expression accused of any offence in this section covers a person accused of an offence at the trial, whether or not he was accused of the offence when he made the confession. So it is not necessary for the purposes of section 25 that the person must have been accused of an offence when he made the confession. Even when he was not an accused at that time, even when there was no FIR against him, even when he was not in police custody, if he makes a confession to a police officer even at that stage, it is covered by section 25. There is an additional protection to a confession made to a police officer. Apart from section 25 of Evidence Act, there is an additional protection to such a confession. And where is that protection? It is in the Criminal Procedure Code itself in section 162. Section 162 CRPC forbids the use of any statement made to a police officer in the course of an investigation. The words of section 162 are wide enough to include a confession made to a police officer in the course of an investigation. So, as far as a confession made to a police officer in the course of an investigation is concerned, there is double protection against its use against the maker. The first protection is available in section 162 itself, 162 of CRPC, and the second protection is in section 25 of the Evidence Act, which covers all confessions made to a police officer under all circumstances. What is covered by sections 162 is a subset of what is covered by section 25. Section 25 Evidence Act is much wider. It covers all types of confessions made to a police officer, whereas in section 162 CRPC we are talking of only those confessions which were made to a police officer during an investigation. There is a question. Can a confessional FIR be used against the informant accused? In other words, if the accused himself goes to the police station and he lodges an FIR confessing his own crime, can this confessional FIR be used against the informant accused? Here is the answer. If the information is a non-confessional statement, it is admissible against the accused as an admission under section 21 of the Evidence Act and is relevant, and therefore it can be proved. But a confessional first information report made to a police officer cannot be used against the accused in view of section 25 of the Evidence Act. And the authority for this proposition is the Supreme Court in Agnu Nagesia versus State of Bihar 1966. Next we come to the third category, confessions made while in custody of police. Section 26. No confession made by any person whilst he is in custody of a police officer shall be proved against him unless the confession is made in the immediate presence of a magistrate. Section 26 covers those confessions which are made to any person other than a police officer, but the maker of the confession is in the custody of a police officer. Any confession made while the maker of the confession is in custody of a police officer, even though the confession itself is made not to a police officer but to some other person. If the confession is made to a police officer, it is already covered by section 25. Here we are talking of those confessions which are not made to a police officer, but yet the person who is making the confession is in custody of a police officer. That is the situation which is covered by section 26. Section 26 prohibits proof of a confession made in the custody of a police officer unless it is made in the immediate presence of a magistrate, and this is a partial ban. This partial ban imposed by section 26 relates to a confession made to a person other than a police officer. So it should be carefully kept in mind that section 26 does not qualify the absolute ban imposed by section 25 on a confession made to a police officer. As far as that confession is concerned, it is not qualified by the statement that if it is made in the immediate presence of a magistrate, it will not be excluded. That is not the case. Section 25 is absolute, as we saw earlier. Section 26 covers situations not covered by section 25, and there the ban is partial, because those confessions which are made in the immediate presence of the magistrate are provable, they are admissible. Certain information received from an accused in police custody may be proved. Now, here is an exception to section 26. Section 26 says that every confession made by a person in police custody will be excluded from the purview of section 21. But here, in the form of exception, we say that certain information received from such a person in police custody may be proved. The relevant section is section 27. When any fact is deposed as discovered in consequence of information received from an accused person in custody of a police officer. There is an accused person, he is in the custody of a police officer, he gives certain information, and in consequence of this information, a fact is discovered and there is a deposition in the court to this effect. What is the deposition in the court? What is the testimony in the court? That a fact was discovered, and this fact was discovered in consequence of the information. This information was received from an accused person. This accused person was in the custody of a police officer. If this happens, then not the entire information, but only that much of the information as it relates distinctly to the fact discovered may be proved. Only a part of the information may be proved. Which part? Only that part which relates distinctly to the fact discovered. That can be proved. And once it is proved, it becomes admissible. Section 27 provides an exception to the prohibition imposed by the preceding section and enables certain statements made by a person in police custody to be proved. The condition necessary to bring the section into operation is that the discovery of a fact in consequence of information received from a person accused of an offence in the custody of a police officer must be deposed, and thereupon so much of the information as relates distinctly to the fact discovered may be proved. This section seems to be based on the view that if a fact is actually discovered in consequence of the information which is given by the accused person, then there is some guarantee which is afforded thereby that the information was true, and accordingly it can be safely allowed to be given in evidence. That was the view of Sir John Beaumont in the Privy Council in the well-known case of Pulukuri Kotaiya versus Emperor in 1947. Now we come to a very important question. What is the meaning and scope of the term fact discovered which has been used in section 27? Here is the answer. It is fallacious to treat the fact discovered within this section as equivalent to the object produced. The court is saying that the term fact discovered is not equivalent to the term object produced. So then what is the fact discovered? The fact discovered embraces the place from which the object is produced, not the object itself, but the place from which the object is produced. And secondly, the knowledge of the accused as to this. As to what? As to the fact that an object is placed in that place, is lying in that place. So the fact discovered embraces firstly the place from which the object is produced, and secondly the knowledge of the accused that such an object is lying at such a place. And the information given must relate distinctly to this fact. And only that much information will be admissible which relates distinctly to this fact. And we have seen what is the fact which is covered by section 27. Accordingly, information as to the past user of that object or the past history of that object which is so produced is not related to its discovery in the setting in which it is discovered. The authority again is Sir John Beaumont of the Privy Council in the Pulukuri Kotaiya versus Emperor case decided in 1947. Now let's take an illustration to understand the scope of section 27. Information supplied by a person in custody. There is a person in custody and he supplies this information. I will produce a knife concealed in the roof of my house. Now this information is given by the person in custody. What is the fact discovered from this information? This information does not lead to the discovery of a knife, because knives were discovered many years ago. There is no discovery of the knife. So what is the fact discovered? From this statement given by the accused in police custody that I will produce a knife concealed in the roof of my house, what is the fact discovered in terms of section 27, of course? It leads to the discovery of the fact. The fact discovered is this, that a knife is concealed in the house of the informant to his knowledge. That's all. There is a knife concealed in the house of the informant and the informant knows about it. If the knife is proved to have been used in the commission of the offence, then this fact discovered is very relevant. So to make this fact relevant, it is necessary to first prove that this knife was actually used in the commission of the offence. But if to this statement the words be added with which I stabbed A, if these words are added, what will be the statement? Let's go back to the earlier slide. The earlier statement was, I will produce a knife concealed in the roof of my house. I will produce a knife concealed in the roof of my house with which I stabbed A. Now, this is the past history of the knife. This is the past user of the knife. And if these words are added to that statement, then these words are inadmissible under section 27. Why? Because they do not relate to the discovery of the knife in the house of the informant. So these words will have to be excluded when we apply section 27 to this confessional statement. Next question. Which confessions are not admissible? We have already seen, and we can now conclude. Confessions made under the circumstances specified under section 24. Section 24 only specifies certain circumstances in which a confession will be excluded. So the answer to the question is confessions made under the circumstances specified under section 24 and before persons specified in section 25 and 26 are not admissible except under circumstances specified in section 27.